Hello everyone. So today we will be dealing about preventive and interceptive orthodontics. So mostly the procedures are very common in preventive and interceptive orthodontics, but the major difference is in its timing. So preventive procedures are undertaken in anticipation of a development of a problem, whereas interceptive procedures are undertaken when the problem is already manifested. So it is relatively a simple topic, and more or less it's not a strictly an ortho topic. It's mostly a combination of your pedo, ortho and your conservative dentistry. So the reference for this chapters will be Balaji. Following Balaji will be more than enough. So we will begin with preventive and interceptive orthodontics. So what is preventive orthodontics? So according to Graeber, preventive orthodontics can be defined as actions taken to preserve the integrity of what appears to be normal at a specific time. So preventive orthodontics is mostly done in anticipation of any malocclusions, and they are mostly a long range approach. Now the following are the procedures which are coming under preventive orthodontics. First and foremost one is your education of the parents. So that is much before they should be educated about on the need for maintaining good oral hygiene and about the tooth shedding timetable, and they also thought about the correct method of brushing. So everything comes under parent education. The second procedure is your caries control. So if the tooth are not properly adequately restored, if any carious tooth is not properly restored, it might lead to the future extraction needs, or might be the exfoliation of the teeth, and which can lead to loss of arch length, and this arch length can causes future crowding and rotations of the permanent teeth. Now maintenance of quadrant wise tooth shedding timetable. Then fourth one is space maintenance. Space maintenance is one of the most common procedures coming under preventive orthodontics, which we are going to discuss in detail. Then screening for oral habits and placing a habit breaking appliances. Then prevention of damage to occlusion, like if the patient is using any devices like Milwaukee braces, you should go for preventive measures so as that devices or appliances does not damage your occlusion. Now extraction of your supernumerary teeth. So please remember, when we were discussing about the etiology of malocclusion, we have seen that the presence of any supernumerary teeth can cause interference with the eruption of the nearby normal teeth, and that it can also cause crowding or can deflect the adjacent teeth to erupt into abnormal position. So it is extremely important that when you notice any supernumerary teeth in your primary dentition, you will go for the extraction of that supernumerary teeth. Then management of ankylosed teeth and abnormal frenal attachments, that also comes under preventive orthodontics. And if there is any occlusal prematurities, you will always go for occlusal equilibration or removal of your occlusal prematurities, so that we can prevent the development of any pseudo malocclusions. So following are the procedures which are coming under your preventive orthodontics, which includes parent education, caries control, maintenance of quadrant wise tooth shedding timetable, space maintenance, which is extremely important, then checking for oral habits, prevention of damage to occlusion, extraction of supernumerary teeth, as well as management of ankylosed deciduous teeth, abnormal frenal attachments, and removal of any occlusal prematurities. So let's discuss about space maintainers, which are an important part of your preventive orthodontics. So what exactly is space maintenance? Space maintenance is what is, as the term implies, it's the preservation of the total arch length, or you are trying to retain all your permanent teeth in the arch in a child's mouth. So during your deciduous your mixed dentition period, you are trying to maintain the you are trying to preserve your total arch length or all of the permanent teeth as they are erupting, so as to prevent the migration of the adjacent teeth, and also to prevent the supra eruption of your opposite teeth. So this implies what space maintenance is. Now why is space maintenance important, and which all regions it is more important? So premature loss of the deciduous teeth can cause drifting of the adjacent teeth into the space, which can result in abnormal axial inclinations, spacing and crowding. So most commonly, it is the loss of your deciduous second molars, especially in the mandibular second deciduous molar area. The loss of this tooth can cause the migration of the permanent first molars mesially, and which can cause the arch length loss and thereby results in malocclusions in the permanent dentition. So most commonly, space maintenance is required in the mandibular second deciduous molar area. Whereas your premature loss of your deciduous anteriors, they lead to very little orthodontic changes, especially in your maxillary anterior region. So space maintenance is least required in maxillary primary incisor area. So when you're going for space maintenance, always, like when a child is approaching you with severely grossly decayed teeth or with a pain and swelling, your immediate or your first priority is to try to restore the deciduous teeth. Don't go for extraction of the deciduous teeth unless and until it is that much indicated. Otherwise, your restored deciduous teeth is the best space maintainer. No other appliance can be equally efficient as a natural restored deciduous teeth. So if you are given a clinical scenario where you might get a question like a child so as like 7 years of age or 8 years of age approaching you with a grossly decayed or pain and swelling in your second deciduous molar region, what is your treatment approach? So of the given options, if there is an option like go for restoration of the teeth, then that is your first and foremost priority. Don't go for looking for which space maintainer to give. If there is an option like you're going to restore the teeth or restoring the teeth and then giving a stainless steel crown or something like that, then that is the best option for writing an answer. So your naturally restored deciduous teeth is your best space maintainer. So your space maintainers can be fixed or removable. So from an exam point of view, it's most important that we know about all the fixed space maintainers. So first we will discussing about the band and loop space maintainers. So please look at the picture. We can see that the adjacent abutment tooth, it might be your second deciduous molar or it might be your permanent first molar. So that tooth is banded. Your adjacent abutment tooth is banded and there will be a stainless steel loop extending mesial to it, and it will be covering the extracted tooth portion. So this band and loop tooth space maintainer, it's a unilateral fixed appliances, and the common indication is when a single tooth is lost in your posterior segment. So band and loop space maintainer is commonly indicated when a single tooth is lost in the posterior segment. So the tooth distal to the extraction space will be banded and a loop of thick stainless steel wire will be soldered to it, and its mesial end will be touching the tooth mesial to the extraction space. So that is the design of your band and loop space maintainer. The distal tooth to the extraction space is banded and the loop will be extending from this band to the tooth mesial to the extraction socket, and it's indicated in posterior segments with a single tooth loss. Now talking about crown and loop appliance, this is actually similar to your band and loop only. There is always a loop, but instead of banding the abutment teeth, that is the tooth distal to your extraction space, we are keeping a crown on the abutment tooth. So why this crown is indicated is when this abutment tooth, that is the tooth distal to your extraction space, is hypoplastic or highly carious, or if it has undergone a pulpotomy procedure. So in such cases we go for a crown and loop appliance. So again this is indicated in cases of a single tooth loss in the posterior segment and your abutment tooth is highly carious, hypoplastic or pulpotomized. Now let's talk about lingual arch. So lingual arch is basically the design consists of banding your permanent first molars or your deciduous second molars, and then a stainless steel wire will be bend and it will be contacting the lingual surface of your four mandibular incisors. So please look at the picture. This is actually showing a lingual arch in your permanent dentition, but the basic design is like this. Yeah, that is your permanent first molars or your deciduous second molars will be banded, and these two banded tooth on the either side of the arch will be connected by a stainless steel wire which will be in contact with your mandibular incisors. An important thing is that the lingual arch is mostly effective for your lower arch. So in lower arch you will keep only in your lower arch you will keep your lingual arch, and this is indicated when there is multiple primary teeth missing. And you can modify the designs by giving U-loops in between the arch wires or your U-loop. So this U-loop is given when you have to go for space regaining. So some space is lost, so you are planning to regain the space, then you can modify the lingual arch by giving loops. Now Nance palatal arch. So Nance palatal arch is actually a modification of your lingual arch in the upper arch. So this is given in your maxillary arch. The lingual arch is given in your lower arch, whereas Nance palatal arch is giving in your upper arch with an acrylic coated portion which is attached to your palatal region, anterior palatal region behind your central incisors. Now another appliance which is used in the upper arch is your transpalatal arch. So transpalatal arch, please note that, look at the picture, that again your permanent first molars or your deciduous molars, second deciduous molars will be banded and they will be joined on the either side by a stainless steel wire. And this is indicated when one side of the arch is intact and on the other side several primary teeth will be missing. So this is the indication for giving a transpalatal arch. So Nance palatal arch and your transpalatal arch, which is also called as TPA, is given in your upper arch, whereas lingual arch is given in your lower arch. And lingual arch is indicated when there is multiple primary teeth are missing, whereas your TPA or your transpalatal arch is indicated in the upper arch when one side is intact, whereas there is loss of tooth on the other side. Now distal shoe space maintainer. So this is also known as intra-alveolar appliances, and this is indicated in cases when your primary second molar is lost before the eruption of your permanent first molars. So this is a condition in which you are having a distal shoe space maintainer where your abutment teeth is your primary first molar which will be banded, and there will be distally an extension from the banded first primary molar. So the one which is commonly used is your Roche's distal shoe or a modification of it, which is using a crown and band appliance, and there will be a distal intragingival extension. So please look at the picture. Your primary first molar is banded, and from there is a distal intragingival extension. So that's a modification. Now, what is the significance of this intra-alveolar appliance or distal shoe space maintainer is that, as we have seen, it is used in cases when your second deciduous molar is lost before the eruption of your permanent first molar. So what happens is that the distal extension of this appliances will provide a greater path of control for the eruption of the unerupted permanent first molar and prevents its mesial migration. So that is the significance of distal shoe space maintainer and its design. Now we have seen the indication of a distal shoe space maintainer, that is early loss of your primary second deciduous molar before the eruption of the permanent first molar. But what are the contraindications for distal shoe space maintainer? These are heart disease, poor oral hygiene, hemophilic patients, systemic disease that affects healing like diabetics, and if there are multiple missing teeth is there, then the abutment will not be sufficient. So in such cases also you cannot give a distal shoe space maintainer. So please note the contraindications: when there is a heart disease, when the patient is having a poor oral hygiene, hemophilic patients. So why hemophilic patients? Because we are giving an intragingival extension, so that can cause bleeding. So the distal shoe space maintainer is not indicated in hemophilic patients and in patients with systemic diseases that can affect the healing like diabetics and multiple missing teeth. that is, if there is insufficient number of abutments, then in such cases also we will not give a distal shoe space maintainer. Now there is one more fixed space maintainer, which is your pin and tube space maintainer, which is indicated in cases when there is a loss of primary maxillary incisors. So we have, when we were discussing about space maintainers, we have mentioned that it is one of the areas where the space maintenance is least indicated, that is your maxillary primary incisor areas. But if you're going for a space maintainers, then a spin and tube space maintainer is most suitable for your maxillary primary incisor area, because it allows the lateral bone growth to happen. Now aesthetic anterior space maintainers. So aesthetic anterior space maintainers was first designed by Stephen Miller and Johnson in 1971. So please look at the picture. We can see that the anterior incisor is lost prematurely. So an aesthetic anterior space maintainer is nothing else. There is a plastic tooth which is fixed onto a lingual arch, which is again attached to the molar bands. So that is the design of your aesthetic anterior space maintainer. And another important space maintainer is your band and bar space maintainer. So as the name implies, the tooth on either side of your extraction space will be banded and they will be connected to each other by a bar. So that is called as your band and bar type space maintainer. Now let's talk about interceptive orthodontics. So far we were discussing about preventive orthodontics specifically in relation to space maintenance. Now let's talk about interceptive orthodontics. So we have already mentioned that preventive orthodontics employs procedures that are done anticipating the appearance of a malocclusion, whereas interceptive orthodontics are procedures which are done when the malocclusion has already manifested. So it's the timing of the procedures which is basically determines whether a process is a preventive orthodontic or a interceptive orthodontic technique. So following are the procedures undertaken in interceptive orthodontics, which include serial extraction, correction of developing crossbite, control of abnormal habits, space regaining, muscle exercise, and interception of skeletal malrelation. So serial extraction, correction of a developing crossbite, control of abnormal habits, space regaining, muscle exercises, and interception of skeletal malrelation. So please note that when we were discussing about preventive orthodontics, we talked about extraction of the supernumerary teeth and checking for habits. Also the removal of occlusal prematurity. So these were all where we were doing a screening, whereas in interceptive orthodontics you are doing serial extraction when there is a crowding which is or an arch length deficiency is evident, or correction of developing crossbite, that is when crossbite is getting manifested, so we are going to correct that developing crossbite, and also for correction of abnormal habits. So these are the common procedures coming under interceptive orthodontics. So what is serial extraction, which is a common procedure coming under interceptive orthodontics? So it is nothing but we are going for a planned extraction of certain primary teeth and some specific permanent teeth in an orderly sequence. So there is a planned extraction in an orderly sequence so that the permanent teeth can erupt into a more favorable position. So that is what is serial extraction. Now this term was coined by Jelgren in 1929, which was popularized in USA by Nance, where Nance termed this procedure as planned and progressive extraction. And Hodge, when he was active during 1970s, he used the terminology active supervision of teeth by extraction. So serial extraction, the term as such, was coined by Jelgren in 1929. It was popularized in USA by Nance, where he called it as planned and progressive extraction, and Hodge named it as active supervision of teeth by extraction. Now, a major indications for serial extraction is that there is a class 1 malocclusion with a skeletal and muscular harmony. So, class 1 malocclusions with harmony between skeletal and muscular system. Then arch length deficiency, when there is compared to tooth material, there is a arch length deficiency, and the profile must be straight and pleasing. So, when there is a harmony between skeletal and muscular system, obviously the profile should be straight and pleasing. So, these are the the two indications. The third one is your arch length deficiency compared to tooth material, and fourth one is the growth is not enough to overcome the discrepancy between the tooth material and basal bone. So the four major indications is that there is a class 1 malocclusion with a harmonious skeletal and muscular system and a straight pleasing profile. Third one is there is an arch length deficiency compared to the tooth material, and fourth one, the growth is not enough to overcome this arch length deficiency. So we have seen the four major indications for your serial extraction. Now we will see about the indications which are clinically manifested. So these include the absence of physiological spacing, there is crowding in upper and lower anteriors, there is localized gingival recession in the lower anterior region, ectopic eruption of the teeth, and there might be mesial migration of the buccal segment, abnormal eruption pattern and sequence, then lower anterior flaring. So there is a lower anterior region if there is localized gingival recession, also if the lower anteriors are showing flaring, and then ankylosis of one or more teeth, and unilateral or bilateral premature loss of deciduous canines with midline shift. So unilateral or bilateral premature loss of deciduous canines with midline shift. So these are the indications or clinical manifestations of your cases which require serial extraction. So this includes absence of physiological spacing, which is a clear indication that the patient will have a crowding in your permanent dentition. Then crowded upper and lower anteriors, localized gingival recession in the lower anterior region, there might be ectopic eruption of the teeth, and the mesial migration of your buccal segments, abnormal eruption pattern and sequence, lower anterior flaring, ankylosis of one or more teeth, and unilateral or bilateral premature loss of deciduous canines, and there is midline shift associated with it. Now, contraindications for serial extractions are when there is a skeletal abnormalities, whether it might be class 2 or class 3, but this is a clear contraindication for serial extractions. Now, if there is a spaced dentition, especially it can be manifesting as a midline diastema, again it is a contraindication to serial extraction, because when we were discussing about the indications, we have mentioned that the patient should have a class 1 malocclusion with harmonious skeletal relationship, and also arch length deficiency should be there. So contraindications will be exactly opposite of that. So the first contraindication is the presence of skeletal abnormalities, whether it might be class 2 or class 3, then spaced dentition, then anodontia or oligodontia. So if there is one missing tooth or multiple missing tooth, then open bite or deep bite. So open bite and deep bite can also indicate as underlying skeletal or muscular disharmony. Now extensive caries or heavily filled first permanent molar. So that indicates like in future that teeth might get extracted. So hence it is a contraindication for a serial extraction, even if the patient is having crowding and the above mentioned arch length problems. But if the permanent first molar is grossly decayed or if it is heavily filled, then you don't go for a serial extraction in such cases. Then if the arch length deficiency is mild, then also you don't go for serial extraction, but you will wait and watch, because the growth might be able to catch up and substitute or compensate for the arch length deficiency. So the contraindications for serial extractions are skeletal abnormalities, class 2 or class 3, then spaced dentition, anodontia or oligodontia, then open bite or deep bite. The fifth one is the permanent first molar being extensively decayed or heavily filled, and mild arch length tooth material discrepancies. So in serial extractions there has been different methods. So first we will be discussing about the Devel's method, which was proposed by Devel, and it is undergoing or it is done in 3 steps. The first step is done in 8 to 9 years of age, where your deciduous canines are extracted. So the first teeth to be extracted here is the deciduous canines, which can be denoted as C. So which is done at 8 to 9 years of age. So this helps in the alignment of your incisors. So your permanent incisors can get aligned by the extraction of your deciduous canines. Now the second step is done 1 year later. So around 8 to 9 years age you are performing performing your first step in your serial extraction. You are extracting your deciduous canines. Then 1 year later, you are extracting your deciduous first molars, so which are indicated as D. So you have extracted your C, now you have extracting your D in your second step, which is done 1 year later. Your 1 year later to the extraction of your deciduous canines. Now, why we are extracting the deciduous first molars is so as to accelerate the eruption of your first permanent first permanent premolars. So, once this permanent premolars are erupted, then you go for the extraction of your erupting first premolars, which is for your alignment of your canines. So, the entire procedure can be summarized as CD4. C is getting extracted at 8 to 9 years of age for the alignment of your permanent incisors, and 1 year later you are going for the extraction of your deciduous first molars for the accelerated eruption of your first premolars. And again, after once the first premolars start get erupting, then you go for the extraction of the first premolars so as to facilitate the eruption of your permanent canines. So the entire procedure can be summarized as CD4, and it begins at around 8 to 9 years of age. 1 year later you are going for the extraction of your D so as to accelerate the eruption of your first premolars, and once the first premolars start erupting, then you go for the extraction of that first premolars. So in the first step you are going for the alignment of your incisors, and finally the first premolars are extracted for the alignment of your canines. Now this method was modified by enucleation of your premolars along with the extraction of your deciduous molars. So it is not becoming a 3-step procedure, but rather a 2-step procedure where simultaneously along with the deciduous molar extraction you go for the enucleation of your premolars. Now another method in serial extraction is the Tweed's method, where your deciduous first molars are getting extracted at 8 years of age, and then there is extraction of your first premolars, and finally your deciduous canines are getting extracted, so along with your first premolars. So it is actually a reverse of your what you have done in your Devil's method. So Devil's method was CD4, whereas Tweed's method is D4C. So first you are extracting your deciduous first molars at 8 years of age, and then you are going for the simultaneous extraction of your first premolars and deciduous canines. So that is Tweed's method, which is indicated as D4 and C. So first you are extracting your deciduous first molars, and then you are going for simultaneous extraction of your first premolars and then your deciduous canines. Now Nann's method is similar to Tweed's method, that is there is extraction of your deciduous first molars followed by the extraction of your first premolars and deciduous canines. Now of all these methods, the most accepted one is your Devil's method, which is CD4, and Tweed's and Nann's method is employing the sequence of D4 and C. So please be thorough with the sequences, don't get mixed up. For Devil's method it is always C, D and 4. We are ordering 4 CDs in Devil's method, whereas in Tweed's and Nann's method it is D4C. Now we have seen some contraindications for serial extraction, that is when there is a skeletal harmonious problem, spacing is there, missing teeth is there, then extensive caries or heavily filled first permanent molars is there. So these are the contraindications. But let's talk about some disadvantages associated with the serial extraction. So first and foremost thing is that when there is a extraction of your teeth, then it can cause deepening of your bite, especially when your posteriors are getting extracted, then it can cause the bite deepening. And another thing is this extraction spaces can cause development of tongue thrust. Also, the third important disadvantage is that there might be ditching between canines and premolars. So mostly the extractionist pattern is concerned with your canines, deciduous first molars and your permanent first premolars. So sometimes this can cause ditching between canine and premolars. And even though we will go for serial extraction and facilitate the eruption of the permanent teeth, the permanent teeth might get erupted in an abnormal axial inclination. And also this is a very long term procedure, so there is a prolonged treatment time which can cause inconveniences to the patient. So these are the disadvantages of serial extraction. The first is deepening of the bite, then there might be chances of development of tongue thrusting, ditching between canine and premolars, and abnormal axial inclination of the teeth, and prolonged treatment time. So when there is severe arch length deficiency and problems, that is growth might not be enough to overcome this arch length deficiency, we always go for serial extractions. But in addition to serial extraction, if there is a mild arch length deficiency, then we can go for disking or proximal stripping on the multiple surfaces of the primary teeth, especially your primary canines. So primary canines is one of the teeth which undergoes proximal disking during your mixed dentition period, so as to facilitate or so as to compensate for minor arch length deficiencies. Now, the disking of this mesial and distal surfaces of the primary canines can allow for spontaneous alignment. So, there won't be any need for any appliances or treatment or any fixed treatment. The disking of the surfaces facilitate the alignment of the teeth. So, please look at the picture. It's showing on the picture on the top right corner, you can see that there is a mild anterior crowding, especially that laterals are mildly improperly axially aligned. The same tooth in the same cast in the same patient we are going for, since this is a mild arch length deficiency, we are going for proximal disking of your deciduous canines. So as, please look at the picture on the bottom right, this teeth, these incisors are getting aligned after the proximal disking of the deciduous canines, and the space thus achieved is used for the proper alignment of your permanent mandibular incisors. So this is a case scenario where there is a mild arch length deficiency which is exhibited by mild anterior crowding, and here we are not going for a serial extraction, but rather we are going for proximal disking or proximal stripping of your mandibular deciduous canines, and this has helped in the alignment of your permanent incisors. So in preventive orthodontics, we are maintaining the space, whereas in interceptive orthodontics, we are trying to regain the space which were lost due to the mesial migration of the tooth adjacent to the extraction space. So the space regaining procedures, if we are doing, then it should be done prior to the eruption of the permanent second molars, because once the permanent second molar starts erupting, they exert further pressure on your permanent first molars, which causes the mesial movement, more mesial movement of your permanent first molars. So whatever space regaining procedures we are performing, then it should be carried out prior to the eruption of your permanent second molars. Now the picture is showing a Gerber space regainer. So one appliance which is used for space regainer is a Gerber space regaining. So please look at the picture and make a clear idea how a Gerber space gainer looks like. So there is a spring attached to it which is extending from the band on your abutment tooth to the teeth mesial to the extraction space. Now another method of using space regaining can be employed by using jack screws and providing expansion of the arch, or also by using cantilever springs. So we have seen serial extraction. Similar to that, another terminology is your Wilkinson extraction. So this is basically you are extracting all your first permanent molars between 8.5 to 9.5 years of age. So the rationale behind this advocating the extraction of the first permanent molars is that this is one of the first permanent tooth to be erupted into your oral cavity, and hence it is highly susceptible to caries and gross decay and exposure and extraction. So hence in Wilkinson extraction, it is advocated for the extraction of all first permanent molars between the age of 8.5 to 9.5, and another reasons are that this early extraction of your first permanent molars can relieve crowding and prevent the impaction of the third molars. So third molars will subsequently get erupted into your oral cavity. But the drawback of this method is that even though we assume that the first permanent molars are huge in size, that they offer a lot of space, but actually in reality they offer only a limited space, and it also deprives of the anchorage, because first permanent molars offer much of the anchorage during your orthodontic treatments, but this deprives of the anchorage. And another thing is that the second molars and the second premolars will tip into the extraction space, and we will not get a proper alignment of the tooth. Both of these teeth will have a tendency to the tip into the extraction space. So these are the drawbacks of the Wilkinson extraction. So along with preventive and interceptive procedures, we will be also discussing about expansion in this chapter. So the first expansion of the palate was first achieved by Emerson C. Angel in 1860. So to classify expansion, it can be classified into three types. One is your dental expansion, the second one is your skeletal or orthopedic expansion, and third one is passive expansion. So dental expansion is primarily your dento-alveolar expansion, where expansion is achieved by the tooth movement. That is, there will be labial movement of your crown and lingual tipping of your roots. So this is how dental expansion is achieved, and this is primarily by means of simple removable or fixed appliances. Now skeletal expansion is when the expansion is more skeletal in nature. So rather than tooth movement, the expansion is brought about by the separation of your mid-palatal and circummaxillary sutures. So this is predominantly achieved by predominantly skeletal in nature, and the example of this is one rapid maxillary expansion or RME appliances. Now passive expansion is where you don't expand the maxilla or you don't expand the skeletal or tooth movement as such, but rather you shield or you protect your jaw and the teeth from pressure exerted by the muscles and the soft tissues. So thereby they will be able to move further labially or buccally. So this type of expansion is produced by functional appliances like FR2 appliance, that is Frankel 2 appliance, and lip bumpers. So you have three kinds of expansion, where one is there is dental expansion or dento-alveolar expansion. Primarily there is tooth movement, there is tipping movement of the teeth, and second one is your skeletal expansion, mostly when there is expansion of your sutures, primarily your mid-palatal and circummaxillary sutures. Third one is there is when you are trying to protect your teeth and the jaw from the influences exerted by your muscles and soft tissues, they will further expand. So that is called as passive expansion, and this is achieved by functional appliances like FR2, Frankel 2 appliance, and lip bumpers. So we have already seen that rapid maxillary expansion or rapid expansion, which is denoted as RME. It's a skeletal type of expansion where you bring about the separation of your sutures, especially your palatal suture, mid-palatal suture, and the adjoining circummaxillary sutures. Now there are certain conditions which indicate the judicious use of your rapid maxillary expansion. So these are one is when there is true maxillary deficiency, that is when class 3 cases, class 3 skeletal malocclusion cases, when there is true maxillary deficiency. Now cleft palate patients. So cleft palate patients are also ideal candidates for rapid expansion, especially those who have a collapsed maxillary arch. And along with reverse pull headgear also, rapid maxillary expansion is given. This is actually as an adjunctive procedure, so as to correct the malocclusions. And the medical conditions where rapid maxillary expansion is indicated are nasal stenosis, septal deformities, and recurrent ear and nose infections. So the major indications or the prime indications for RME is true maxillary deficiency, cleft palate patients with collapsed maxillary arch, and it is also given along with the reverse pull headgear. And medical conditions which require RME are nasal stenosis, septal deformities, recurrent ear and nose infection. Now contraindications, that is the conditions where you don't jump into and give a RME appliances, include if there is a single tooth crossbite. So if it is single tooth crossbite, you don't give a RME. Second one is if after 15 years of age, that is after your mid-palatal suture gets ossified. So after ossification of the suture, there is no point in giving an RME appliances, because the suture is already ossified and it won't get expanded. Now third thing is when there is a vertical growth pattern. So vertical growth pattern is unfavorable for RME appliances, and it is also not given in young preschool children because it can bring about nasal deformities. So these are the contraindications for RME when there is a single tooth crossbite. So single tooth crossbite suggests primarily it suggests that the malocclusion is not skeletal, it might be dental. So in such cases you don't give an RME appliance. Second thing is when once the mid palatal suture is ossified, that is after 15 years of age, we don't do RME. Third one is vertical growth pattern, which is unfavorable for a RME appliance. And the final one is young preschool children, RME is contraindicated. So please be thorough with the indications and contraindications of RME. Not only RME, most of the treatment plans you should be able to identify which case is ideal for an RME or which case is not. So what exactly happens in rapid maxillary expansion? So in a rapid maxillary expansion, there will be the opening of the mid palatal suture. So please look at the pictures. So in the anteroposterior direction, there is a triangular or fan shaped opening. So please look at the picture on the right top corner. You can see that there is a fan shaped or triangular shaped opening. So in the triangular shaped opening, the base is towards the incisor area. So the maximum opening is happening towards the incisor area, whereas posteriorly the opening will be minimal and it narrows down to your apex. Whereas in the supro-inferior direction, please look at the picture on the bottom right corner. In the supro-inferior aspect also, there is a fan shaped or triangular shaped opening with maximum opening towards your oral side and less towards your nasal side. So this rate of expansion in rapid maxillary expansion is 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters per day, and the force generated for this is around 10 to 20 pounds. So around 10 to 20 pounds of force is required to bring about RME, and the rate of expansion is 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters per day. And other changes due to RME is that in the maxillary dentition there will be a midline spacing. Now this is the most reliable clinical evidence of RME. That is, once you give an RME expansion, within a month there will be a midline spacing or opening up of a midline diastema. So the amount of the spacing or diastema which will be half the distance the screw is opened. So if you open the screw for around 10 millimeters, then the separation will be around 5 to 6 millimeters. Now what happens in the posterior teeth? Maxillary anterior teeth, you will be seeing a midline diastema. Now in the posterior region there will be tipping of the posterior teeth. So in rapid expansion, apart from the skeletal effects in maxilla, in the dentition there will be spacing, midline spacing, as well as tipping of your buccal teeth. Now what happens to the nasal cavity? So when there is the RME expansion, we have seen in the previous slide that there is a fan shaped opening in the supro-inferior direction. So the maximum opening towards the oral cavity, but there is an opening happening around the nasal side also. So what happens in the nasal cavity is that there will be reduced resistance to nasal flow, and there will be an increase in intranasal space. So that is why even ENT people also advocate the medical conditions we have seen. One of the indications for RME is the nasal stenosis and recurrent ear and nose infection. So that is the rationale behind giving RME appliances in such medical conditions, because there will be reduced resistance to nasal flow and an increase in intranasal space. So the effect of RME in maxilla, we have seen there is the opening of the mid-palatal suture, which is fan shaped or triangular shaped, maximum opening towards the incisor region, and in the supra-inferior direction maximum opening is towards your oral cavity side, and the rate of expansion is 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters per day. The effect on maxillary dentition will be the most important clinical sign, that is your midline spacing, and also there will be tipping of your maxillary buccal teeth, and in nasal cavity there will be increase in intranasal space and reduced resistance to nasal flow. So we have seen about the skeletal and dental effects of RME. Now we will see about the appliances which are used to bring about rapid expansion. Now from an exam point of view, this is more important than knowing about the indications and contraindications of an RME. So since we are giving an online exam, it's extremely important that you will be thorough with the images of all these appliances, so that when they show you a picture and ask you which appliance is this, you should be able to answer it very confidently and with most guarantee. Now, the fixed rapid maxillary expansion appliances can be of two types. One is tooth-borne, the second one is tooth and tissue-borne. So, tooth-borne appliances mainly derive its anchorage from the dental components, whereas tooth and tissue-borne appliances will have anchorage from dentition as well as your palatal region. Now, if in the tooth-borne appliances, the first one is your iSection type Minne expander. So this Minne expander is developed by the University of Minnesota Dental School. So basically, there is no in tooth-borne appliances, generally in tooth-borne appliances there won't be any acrylic palatal covering. So please understand this difference. In tooth-borne appliances there won't be any acrylic palatal covering. So if you are given an image of an appliance, an expansion appliances, look for palatal acrylic covering. So if there is no palatal acrylic covering, then it is a tooth-borne appliance. Now in iSection type uses a Minne expander, that is a spring loaded screw. So please look at the picture. Here you can see that the premolars and the first permanent molar is banded, and the metal flanges will be soldered onto the bands, and this metal flanges will be connected to a spring loaded screw. So this spring loaded screw is called as your Minne expander, which is developed by the University of Minnesota Dental School. So it's a coil having a nut. So please look at the picture. You can see that there is a coil passing through your mid palatal region. So this coil spring is made to extend between the lingual flanges, which are soldered to your band, to the bands on the molars and premolars, and this expander is activated by closing the nut so that the spring gets compressed. So this nuts will be closed so that the spring will get compressed. So this compressed spring will have a tendency to go back to your normal position, which brings about the expansion. So that is how an iSection type expander functions, which makes use of a spring loaded screw, that is called as the Minne expander. So it's a spring loaded screw. It is basically consisting of a coil spring having a nut which is connected to your metal bands, which are soldered onto the premolars and molars. So what you do to activate this appliances is you close the nuts so that the spring in the Minne expander will get compressed. So this compressed spring will have a tendency to go back to the original position, which brings about expansion. So please note, we are discussing about tooth-borne RME appliances. So tooth-borne RME appliances don't have acrylic palatal covering. Always remember that. And iSection type is using a Minne expander, which is nothing but a spring loaded screw. So if you are given a picture of an expansion appliances without any palatal covering, first thing is you have to notice that it is a tooth-borne RME appliance. Second things, look for the type of expander that is being used. So if it is like a spring loaded screw, then it is a iSection type expander, and the expander which is used is called as your Minne expander, developed by University of Minnesota Dental School. Now the second type of tooth-borne RME appliance, fixed RME appliance, is your Hyrax type. So Hyrax is the abbreviation for Hygiene Rapid Expander. So this again makes use of a screw called Hyrax, that is your Hygiene Rapid Expander, which have heavy gauge wire extensions. So please look at the picture here. They have heavy gauge wire extensions which are soldered to the flanges onto the premolars and molars. So here there is no screws, but rather there is a heavy wire gauge extensions from the Hyrax screw. So in iSection type you had a coil spring. There is an entire coil getting passing over the palatal region. Here you have a screw which is your Hygiene Rapid Expander, which is having metal extensions which are soldered to your premolars and molars. So that is how a Hyrax type appliance looks like. So both Isaacson and Hyrax don't have palatal acrylic covering. They are tooth-borne fixed RMA appliances. Isaacson makes use of a loaded spring, and that is called as your mini expander, whereas Hyrax has a spring screw type. Hyrax has got a screw. Please note it is a screw which is called as Hygiene Rapid Expander. Now, tooth and tissue-borne appliances, RMA appliances, makes use of acrylic plates in which the screw will be attached for the expansion of the appliances, and the molar as well as the premolars will be banded, and from the lingual aspects of this premolars, wire extension, soldered wire extensions will be connected to the screw along with through the acrylic plate. So the example for tooth and tissue-borne RMA appliances are your Derrick Sweller type as well as your Haas type. So you have two types of fixed RMA appliances, tooth-borne and tooth and tissue-borne. So exclusively tooth-borne fixed RMA appliances are your Isaacson type and your Hyrax type, that is your Hygienic Rapid Expander type. Now the combination of tooth and tissue-borne fixed RMA appliances includes Derrick Sweller type and Haas type, which both makes use of palatal acrylic coverings in which your screws for the expansion purpose are embedded. Now let's discuss about the activation schedules for the expansion screws. So if the screw is turned by 90 degree, then it will bring about around 0.18 millimeter of linear movement. So 90 degree of turning the screw will bring about 0.18 millimeter of linear movement. So there are basically two types of activation schedules, which was one is suggested by Timms and the second one is suggested by your Simmering and Isaacson. So according to Timms, patient up to 15 years of age, that is the young growing patients, we can go for an activation schedule with the 90 degree rotation in the morning and the evening. So imagine you are giving 90 degree of rotation in the morning and the evening. So in net effect, in a day you will be able to bring about 0.36 millimeters of linear movement, that is 0.18 millimeter in the morning and 0.18 millimeter in the evening. So that is what Timms is suggesting. Up to 15 years of age, 90 degree of rotation in the morning and in the evening. Now above 15 years of age, you can go for 45 degrees 4 times a day. So up to 15 years of age, 90 degree in the morning, 90 degree in the evening, that is total 180 degree. Again, if you are getting older, above 15 years of age, then you will further split that into 4 schedules. So 45 degree of activation 4 times a day. Now according to Simmering and Isaacson, for growing patients, you can go for 2 turns per day for 4 to 5 days, and after that 1 turn per day. So initially you will go for 2 turns per day for 4 to 5 days, and after that you will go for 1 turn per day. Now for adult patients, for 2 days you will go for 2 turns per day and 1 turn per day for next 5 to 7 days. So for adult patients you will go for 2 turns per day for 2 days. Then you will go for 1 turn per day for next 5 days. So that is Simmering and Isaacson's activation schedule. For young patients, growing patients, you will go for 2 turns per day for 4 to 5 days. So initially for 4 to 5 days, you will go for 2 turns per day. Then you will reduce it to 1 turn per day until the expansion is achieved. Now for adult patients, initially only for 2 days you are giving 2 turns, and after that for 1 week you are giving 1 turn per day. So that is the activation schedules. One is by Timms. According to him, up to 15 years of age you are giving 90 degree rotation in the morning and the evening, so total 180 degree. Now if at above 15 years of age, you are again giving 180 degree of activation, which is split into 4 times a day. So that will give you 45 degree of activation 4 times a day. According to Simmering and Isaacson, for growing patients, daily you will give 2 turns per day for initial 4 to 5 days. After that you will give only 1 turn per day. For adult patients, you will giving 2 turns per day only for 2 days. For a minimal number of days, you are giving 2 turns, and after that 1 turn per day for 5 to 7 days. So we have seen much about rapid expansion. Now let's talk about slow expansion. So slow expansion is primarily your dentofacial expansion or dentoalveolar expansion, where the expansion achieved is only 0.5 to 1 millimeter per week. So here you have to note that in rapid expansion it was 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters per day. Per day there was 0.5 millimeter expansion in RME, whereas in slow expansion it is just 0.5 to 1 millimeters in a week, and the force required is even less, that is 2 to 4 pounds, whereas there you have to require 10 pounds of force. Here you will require only 2 to 4 pounds of force. Now the appliances which are commonly used to bring about slow expansion are your removable appliances incorporating jack screw, then coffin spring, which was designed by Walter Coffin, then W arch and quad helix. So quad helix is another appliance designed by Ricketts. So these are the appliances which are commonly used to bring about slow expansion. So even though we have seen the differences in the rate of expansion between dental and skeletal expansion in RME as well as slow expansion, that is in RME the rate of expansion is 0.2 to 0.5 millimeters per day, whereas in slow expansion it is just 0.5 to 1 millimeters per week. But in net result at the end of the treatment after 3-4 months, the amount of expansion in the skeletal and dental will be equal for both RME as well as slow expansion. That is, in RME type of expansion, if you are achieving 10 mm of expansion in the first month, in that 8 mm will be skeletal and 2 mm will be dental. So that is how the ratio of expansion achieved in the initial month. But after 4 months later, even though the 10 mm of expansions will be still achieved, here the ratio of skeletal and dental expansion will be now 1:1. That is, the amount of expansion achieved is dentally and skeletally will be equal. Whereas in slow expansion, from the beginning to the end, the ratio of expansion achieved skeletal and dental remains the equal. So in the net effect at the end of the day, the amount of expansion achieved after 3-4 months for RME as well as in slow expansion, the amount of expansion achieved skeletal and dental always remain the same. But initially RME will be having a greater skeletal component. That is, after the end of a month, the ratio of expansion between skeletal and dental will be 8:2 in case of an RME. But after 3-4 months, this ratio will be equal. Whereas in slow expansion, from the beginning to the end, the amount of expansion skeletal and dental achieved is almost the same throughout. So finally, we are dealing with one more appliance in expansion, which is a night eye expander, which is a very recent innovation in expansion appliances developed by Arnott in 1993. So this is actually a fixed removable tandem loop night eye expander. So as the name suggests, it makes use of the night eye wire and its properties, that is the shape memory and transition temperature. So one of the advantages of this appliance is that it is capable of providing a uniform, slow, continuous force for expansion. So that is why the expansion is produced at a rate which helps to provide a time period for repositioning and remodeling of the teeth and the bone. So the palate expansion and the bone regeneration will be matching each other. It's not like your expansion is outpacing the bone regeneration, since this appliance is making use of the night eye wire and its shape memory and transition temperature property. It produces a uniform slow expansion, and the rate of expansion is matching with the rate of bone regeneration. Now one more important thing when you're dealing with appliances is that please be thorough with how the appliance looks like. Or so if you're getting a question like a picture based question where the picture of this appliance is given and they might ask you identify the appliances. So first of all, you should be able to understand that this is an expansion appliances, especially when the molars are banded and the appliance is attached to the adjacent teeth, then it will be most probably an expansion appliances. Especially in the upper arch palatal aspects appliances are shown in the questions, most probably that will be an expansion appliance. First important thing It's not like 100% it will be expansion appliances, but most chances of palatal appliances being expansion appliances are high. Now, second important thing is that please understand this is a night tie expander. So this night tie wire will be soldered and placed into the lingual sheath of your molar bands. And from there, anteriorly there will be extensions to the canine and lateral incisor region so as to provide expansion in the anterior region. So there will be lateral expansion in the canine region. So there will be anterior extension. So that will be a general pattern of your night tie expander. So there will be night tie expanders that will be soldered and inserted into the lingual sheath of your molar band, and there will be anterior extensions extending to the lateral and canine region. Please note that this design is different from that of your quad helix, whichever quad helix which we have seen previously. Also your rapid expansion appliances like your Isaacson type expander, Hyrax type, Derrick-Swella has. So you better be thorough with how these appliances looks like, because most of your questions from these chapters will be based on pictures. So don't confuse any of these appliances. Please go through these pictures of these appliances again and again and be thorough how a Hyrax will look like, how an Isaacson will look like, how a quad helix will look like, and how a night tie expander will look like. So please be thorough with that. Don't confuse between a quad helix and a night tie expander. Quad helix will definitely have 4 helices, and whereas night tie expander won't have any helices, and anteriorly there will be only plain extensions. Now, one more thing about night tie expander I have to mention is that this expander, when it is placed, I already mentioned that it is making use of the property of transition temperature. So it will be cooled with the ice packs, and then only it is inserted into the patient's mouth. And once it reaches the oral temperature or your human body temperature, it will shows the properties of transition temperature and shape memory, and that is how it brings about the expansion of your palate. So we are concluding with the chapter 8. Please go through the questions and try to answer it. Apart from the questions in your dental pulse, please go through the appliances, especially the pictures of the appliances. You can Google it out, or you can use the pictures in the PPT, or if you don't want to strain much your eyes, you can go through your Balaji textbook or any other ortho textbook. Please just browse through the pictures, and again whenever you're feeling bored reading so much things, just go through the pictures and just try to identify by yourself which appliance is this. So that helps you a lot in your exams. So please try the questions.